And we're back. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems. With me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Sales is leadership, and leadership is persuasion, appealing to others' greater good and working with them to achieve their goals. That takes action through influence, which is convincing others to take action. Put on your thinking caps as Bill and I discuss. Take advantage of Cialdini's 6 principles of influence and much more on episode 429 of Get in the Door podcast.
So we're going to start off this week with our book club. We are in the second chapter of Beyond Selling Value by Mark Shanka and Dan Kosh. If you didn't listen to last week's podcast, that was an interview with one of the authors, Dan Kosh. They have been kind enough to give us some books to give away. So we'll be doing a book giveaway as well every week as we go through these chapters. Chapter 2 is called Bare Bones and Brass Tacks, and really it's a setup of what their process is. But Scott, I like their process, and I want to talk a lot about their premises of what they talked about, what are the keys to selling. And you and I might have some disagreement on these, so that'll be a good conversation. But
I agree.
The process is 3 steps: research, communication, and presentation. They call it the RCP process. Research, communication, and presentation. And we're going to go through those in detail, so I didn't want to talk about those too much. But their premises, they had 6 premises for why you need to go beyond selling value. The first one is that senior level decision makers are more likely to buy based on what you know about their business and industry and less on your own product or service knowledge. What'd you think of that one?
Well, it sounds pretty intellectual to me, and I always heard and I believe that people buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually. And I think that prospects are really going to listen to salespeople when the conversation turns to the cost and impact of an action. I think every salesperson deals with that. Change is very difficult for decision makers and prospects to consider. But once you talk about what is it going to cost them if they don't do something, then I think their motivation increases. And it's focused on the impact on them as to why they would want to change. Why is an emotional question? Anything begins with why is emotional. So I understand the intellectual premise of it, but I think there also needs to be an emotional side of it.
No, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that intellectual. What he's saying is that when the higher you get up in the hierarchy of an organization, the less they're concerned about what this product is, and the more concerned about the impact on their business and industry. And if you don't know about their business, if you don't know about their industry, it's going to be very hard to sell to them because of just that impact that you're talking about, the why.
Right.
The why doesn't become okay because it's easier to do this or you like it. The why is because it's going to have a business or industry impact. It's going to change our business in some way. And you have to really understand that business in order to have that conversation.
Well, and I'll add another layer onto my past comment, and that is that the prospect needs to understand why and what it's going to do for them. When the prospect discovers the reasons on why they would want to make a change, it has a greater influence than a salesperson telling them how much they know about the industry.
I don't think they're telling them about the industry. You're showing through the connections that you understand their industry. I think the challenge that a lot of people, salespeople go through is that they get into too many different kinds of industries. And so then they go in there and I like asking questions, but the first question shouldn't be, so tell me about your business.
Right.
It's got to be, tell me why your business does this, and shows that you've done some research that says you understand what's going on in their business.
Right.
So the second premise is no single event in the process is more important than the meeting with the decision maker.
Yeah, it's true. You obviously have to have a conversation with somebody that can say yes and not have conversations with people that only can say no.
Right.
So
and they talked a lot about,
game.
and they talked a lot about the individual, or the, they call him the gatekeeper, but it's the person, the gatekeeper isn't the secretary, right? It's the person who thinks they have, or assumes they have, or pretends they have the ability to say yes, when all they're going to do is pass information on to the real decision maker.
Right.
And a lot of salespeople get stuck on that person, and they don't ask the right questions. The one I like to ask is, in addition to you, who's going to be involved in this decision?
Yeah,
and it assumes you're part of it, but it also assumes that there's others. and hopefully you can smoke out who that real decision maker is.
Mm-hmm. Right. And without them being guarded, another way of asking that same question is, in the past, how have you gone about making decisions like this?
Right.
And now you're going to learn more about the people and the process.
The
And the
process,
criteria. The criteria that they're going to follow too.
And a lot of times that gatekeeper can be purchasing. And that's one of the challenges where we get into not selling value, but only selling on price. Right, because they're trained to try and help you or move you just toward price and ignore your value.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Premise 3, you only get one chance to make a first impression. I think we've heard that before.
Yeah.
My grandmother said that one.
Right. So true. I think that's kind of on the first date too.
Yeah, really. Yeah. I haven't had a first date for a long time, but I know you're still involved in the process.
I am. I'm still.
So do you ask that question when you start your first date? Now, how do you usually make a decision for a second date? What's your process? And who else is involved in the decision on these dates? So we're getting some insight into you and your dating process.
I get to the goal pretty quickly.
Do you? Okay. All right. Well, there you go. But I think that, even though it's an old saw, it's pretty true. You better be prepared for the first time you get in front of the decision maker. Don't wing it. Too many salespeople just, man, I know my product and service, and so I'll just go in and really wow them with how much I know. And for the decision maker, it's just not so true. All right. Premise number 4, early and continual access to the decision maker is crucial to success. So it's not just one meeting, it's getting to that decision maker early in the process. And I think the longer, what I liked about this is the longer you get involved with a gatekeeper or somebody in purchasing, the more they think they have the power and the more they put up the barriers to you.
Right. Yeah. And they're being guarded and defensive. I think it's another thing to keep in mind that sometimes we are following up on voicemails or emails with the decision maker, and we haven't really engaged in a conversation about whether they're going to buy from us or not. We haven't even got to that first step in discovery and getting information. So we need to be able to always have a reason every time we call or email or follow up with a prospect. And after we're engaged in the conversation, always have a reason and an agenda every time we have a meeting. So if there's a goal, and make sure that your goal is communicated and you have a complete understanding about what the prospect's goal is, and ask them, what would you like to cover during our time? Suppose the hour were to pass, what do you want to make sure that we cover?
And what time, what is your time frame, and how long do we have? And make sure you respect that and offer to leave at that time frame rather than powering on through because it looks good, right? So a lot of people can be very polite, but really want you to leave their office. So the number 5, for effective positioning, the power of a presentation exceeds the power of a product demonstration or a discussion. You had a challenge with that in kind of our pre-conversation.
I've heard the saying, and I know that it might be, you have to think about it, but the best presentation you can ever give a prospect is one that they never see. And I've learned that early on in my sales career. And what that really means is when you get into a conversation and you're talking about what's most important to the prospect, you almost get them to a point of saying, asking, how do you solve this problem, or how do you work with companies like me, or the salesperson would say, what would you like me to do next? And they'd say, is there an agreement that you have, or something, a formal agreement, or could you put a proposal
I think
together?
they want to ask for some kind of a proposal. What are we going to get? What's your layout? What the process is? But I think then when you bring that proposal or whatever that is, statement of work into them, then I think then you're presenting on that statement of work.
And I always think a presentation is going through how the solution is going to be solving the problem. And it may be stuff that has not been discussed before.
Yeah.
I think what's important with a statement of work or a proposal or an agreement is that everything that is in that has already been discussed.
It's a confirmation.
Confirmation. Exactly, Bill.
Versus I think what they're concerned, one of their big concerns is the pitch. Right. Too often, what a salesperson will go in and do is do their company pitch, which I've seen 1,000 of them, and they all suck. They're all about how wonderful we are and how we can do tremendous things, and we're a global company, and we have 5,000 offices around the world, and blah, 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 blah. And I think when they talk about understanding the other person's business, it's shut up about yourself and start asking questions and presenting information that's crucial to them, not about how wonderful your company is.
Right. And sometimes the presentations can be so glorifying that the prospect becomes even more guarded because they have the mindset of it's too good to be true and there's something that's got to
Yeah.
fall. There's some reason that this is just not going to work. And I haven't figured it out yet, but
Yeah.
it just sounds too good to be true.
Well, and many times you insult them. Hey, we're a global company. Well, we only work in the state of Minnesota. We're only in New Jersey. Why do I care if you're a global company?
Right.
So we don't monitor what we're saying to answer the question, who cares about whether this is important? But I don't think that's the kind of presentation they're talking about here. I think they're talking about a presentation of ideas and concepts that fit our product to your needs and issues that we've discovered before. So, and then strategy number 6 is you must prove business fit before you prove the product fit. Now, I think that goes back to the business and industry understanding.
Right. And also the application. I think the value is in the application of the solution, not in the specs of the product. And I think sometimes we can get really confused as salespeople that get so focused on the specs and the product knowledge that we don't really present or uncover the application of the product so that the customer gets an result or an impact that solves a problem or creates a goal or avoids a future problem.
Well, we talk about how wonderful our product is and how easy it is to use and how, it blends in seamlessly with whatever, blah, blah, blah. But we never talk about the results of using it long term and how that's going to, save money, save time, ease your burden, whatever those why questions are that you brought up earlier. And that's the business fit. Right. Is why should I do something different than I'm already doing now? The reluctance to change, whether it's a product that we're using, a piece that we're using, a part that we're using, moving from one vendor to another, companies are reluctant to do that. That's the advantage to the current provider, is the reluctance to move. So you better have a compelling argument on why, from a business standpoint, you should move, not just from, it's prettier.
Right.
They talked a lot about research. As I said, we're going to go into that in detail. That's chapters, 3, 4, 5, I think, are all on research. But a couple of points they wanted to make: sell from the top down and at all levels, which was important. And then focus on business fit, not just product fit. So those are kind of, we talked about those.
Yeah.
Then they had 7 benefits for moving beyond traditional value selling. So this is why we ought to do this. Shorten the sales cycle.
I use that one today. I totally agree with that concept.
Yep. And I think that's absolutely true. If we spend all of our time with lower level people who can't make decisions, the sales cycle is going to go on forever. If we get to the decision maker, sometimes a no is better than a maybe.
Well, sometimes the no is the beginning of a conversation too, because now you're really working on being more of an advisor and a consultant than you are a salesperson. And then when you get into that conversation, you have a different hat on and they're really looking at you differently. And now they're really starting to be listening because they've already said their no. Yep. And now they feel like they've got it out there and they can stand on it. That's their position. And then you can work on a different approach. What have you got to lose, really? And or sometimes you just want to walk away too.
Well, my favorite mug says sales begins when the customer says no.
Yeah.
So that's exactly when you have to start doing your work. Value number 2, assess the probability of the sale early on in the sales cycle, which is kind of what we were talking about.
That's not done enough. I think salespeople clog up their pipeline with unqualified prospects because they love having a full pipeline. Well, I got my pipeline; it's full. Well, how long is your sales cycle? Well, it's hard to say.
Well, I've been touching base with this guy for a year and a half, and he hasn't answered any of my emails, but he hadn't said no yet, so that one's good.
Right. Yeah.
But and we've talked about this before: asking the tough questions early on the sale. Do you have the budget to do this? What's your budget? Where are we going? If your budget's 5,000 and I need 50, we may be too far apart to move this forward.
Well, put the pressure on them. Suppose we find a reason on why you would want to buy this and it's important and it's urgent and you're committed to do it. Would you find the money to be able to spend or invest in this? And then put that on them. And now they got to figure it out.
But if you wait until the proposal and then you go, they're thinking 5,000 and you drop 50,000 in their lap and you've never talked about money before.
Oh,
now you're
dead. That ain't
dead.
going to work out.
No, you're dead. So you've got to get in that early. Good. You talked about this early in the consulting, but that's become a true resource.
Right.
And that's a big part of is their movement from a vendor to a business resource.
Yeah.
So
True.
manage customer expectations. What does the customer think going to happen? You need to do that better. Again, as our example of dropping a price on them that's way out of their mindset, not out of their budget, because budgets are shifting, but mindset can be difficult to overcome.
I think one thing to keep in mind is the only way to disappoint somebody is to not meet their expectations. And I think too often salespeople go into a conversation with the prospect being assumptive, and they think that the prospect is going to buy for their reasons, the salesperson's reasons, versus the prospect's reasons. So stop being assumptive. Ask questions. Find out what their goal is. Find out their reasons to make a change. Know what their expectations are, and just ask them, what do you expect from me between X to X? Or X to Y, and make sure that you take note of that, because that's the only way that you're going to disappoint them, is to not meet those expectations. And they're making it very easy for you to be successful. Here are their expectations, deliver on them. Everybody's going to be happy.
Right. And so as you're forming your statement of work or your proposal, those expectations come out in that to make sure that you're answering those expectations. And even when I do that, I find there's some changes. There's some new pieces. Oh, wait a minute, you didn't address this thing. Oh, we never talked about that. And that's why I like, because then they get to form the statement of work. And once they've formed that proposal, then it's theirs, not mine.
Right, right.
So that's part of the expectation process. Number 5, differentiate yourself from the competition is one of the values.
And I think you need to differentiate yourself to be better. Differentiate just means different, not the same as.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this before.
I can be much worse than my competition.
Right, you're really different. Hard. Great. You know.
I think it's assumed that we're differentiating ourselves to the better.
Well, it's assumed. There it is, being assumptive. But
I like to be. You know what? My favorite close is the assumptive close. So okay. I think you can carry people a lot further through some assumptions, but then you make up for it in the backside. So
right, but just keep in mind, you want to be better, not different. I mean, there are some cell phone plans that are different. They ain't better by any means. They're not better. They're different.
There's some politicians that are different too.
That's true. Yeah,
not necessarily better. All right, elevate the priority of a project. I found this one to be very important. The quicker you can get to the decision maker, the more shortening the sales cycle, the project priority is higher, because the benefits to that decision maker, the value to that decision maker becomes more apparent. And then they can make a decision and say, let's do it. Now let's figure out how to do it.
And another great question to ask is, suppose you agree to commit to this. Are there any other competing projects that are going to distract you from spending time, money, and energy on this? Let's talk about it right now, because I want to be able to work on the timeline that I'm proposing and the timeline that you want, so that we can meet your expectations. But if there's competing projects that are coming along, things are going to be delayed. We're not going to get it implemented. You're not going to get the result. And whatever timeline you want is going to be uncertain.
Right.
So let's make sure that we know what we're competing against.
That's a good question. I don't think I asked that one very often. So put that one in your memory banks. And then finally, close more efficiently. And that means, what I think, to tell you the truth, if things are going well, that conversation is going well, I don't ask them if they want to buy. I just say, so when are we going to start this? How are we going to start this project? Let's make sure that the budgets are aligned. And I find that to be a very valuable assumptive close, even though you don't like assuming. Mm-hmm. And that's just moving beyond the question. That's moving beyond the closing question. It's a different kind. It's getting into project details. And I find that once they've committed to project details, they've already closed themselves.
Right. I love clarity.
So they talked also about selecting targets and some other things in this chapter. Very good chapter. It will set you up for whether you like their style of sales or not. I find it to be very valuable. Scott finds it, he thinks the book needs maybe an update, which I think Dan said they're in the process of.
It does show how the market has transitioned over the last 20 years. And we can see how prospects have engaged with salespeople. And hopefully we can see how salespeople have evolved with the marketplace and on how prospects buy. And that's the context of it. I think it's great information. And I think that there are still timeless practices and techniques in the book that are important to adopt and reconsider things that you're doing now too.
Yeah, and some of those changes Dan talked about last week, one of them being that a lot more of the younger people are a part of that decision-making process, and they like a team decision-making process. I think we're seeing that a lot, where it's not just one person, but you're presenting or having conversations with a group of people more than you used to have this one individual decision maker. A lot of decision makers are trying to grow their people by letting them make decisions at a lower level and then checking with them. So some of those changes are becoming apparent in the business world. This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by the hosts of the Get in the Door podcast.
Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future. So our focus on today's podcast is from the book Influence by Cialdini. He's got 6 principles of influence, and these are timeless principles, and these are great when it comes to sales. And I believe they're timeless when it comes to negotiations, Bill. And I think you'd be happy to hear that sales and negotiations.
Salespeople should never involve themselves in negotiation.
I think it's more than cutting the price. And I don't. Well,
that's not negotiation. Cutting the price is not.
Some people think it is.
Well, that's
save it for group, Bill. Save it for group.
Yeah, well, all right. So let's talk about Cialdini before we get into negotiation again.
All right. So we'll go through these 6, and they're again very, very timeless. So the first one is reciprocity. And this is, for me, it's known as a law of exchange. And I believe it's really the foundation of negotiation, which is exchanging and trading. And the important thing to keep in mind is that we're trading value for value. We're not trading item for item, because not all items carry the same value. And I think one of the things that this principle talks about is who should go first. And I always believe that the person that is at the weakest position in the negotiations or in the sales position should go first. And by giving something to somebody else, by giving them a gift, and then the law of reciprocity is that they give something back. Do you agree with that, Bill? Or?
Well, I think of it as you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And so when people do something kind for us, there's a feeling of obligation that comes in to do something kind for them. So I think we see that in let's say a charity, and they send us a calendar or labels, return address labels, if anybody even uses mail anymore. And we see that as a kindness. And so we send them a check back for $10 because we read what they're doing. So there's an emotional appeal here in this principle of reciprocity that goes beyond just the equal trade of product for value. There's an emotional aspect to it. If someone is kind to us, we want to be kind in return. I think the thing we have to be careful of in selling is that we don't do something overt. I remember, and I can't remember what book I read this in, but a gentleman was talking about a business that they really didn't like, and the guy sent him a bottle of bourbon or something for Christmas. Oof. And he sent it back to him, and he said, I know what that guy's going to do. The first thing he's going to do is walk in my office, and he's going to say, hey, how did you like that great bottle of bourbon that I sent you? And now you want to do business with me. So he was really, you can't be ham-handed with this. You've got to have a relationship, and then that gift giving has to be sincere and not something that feels like you want reciprocity for it.
Right. I think it needs to be personalized and unexpected. I've been asked to do webinars for organizations, and I worked with one group. I did, I think, a total of 3 webinars, and every time I did a webinar, they made a donation to a charity in my name. which was very generous. And it was a common cause that we both believe in. And it was money that went to go support somebody else. And it was a very nice gesture. So it was personalized. It was totally unexpected. And I will remember that every time I'm asked to do a presentation for them, is because they're supporting a charity that I believe in.
Right.
And you can do this when you meet with prospects. You can look at their website. You can see what foundations they're part of or what organizations they're contributing to. If you meet with a high-level decision maker saying, we really appreciate your time, and because of that, we want to make a donation to this charity in your name. And we've written out a check and we've sent it to them, and we're really grateful. And you will be recognized for supporting their charity. And thank you for the time together.
And there's some real easy things we can do. Send a handwritten note instead of an email.
Yeah.
That says you're more important than just a quick email. If you have coffee, you have lunch, just go ahead and pay for it. That's just a nice thing to do. Send a small gift, not something overwhelming on holidays, birthdays. People go to sporting events. Well, they used to go to sporting events. Someday we will again, and social events. But don't try to be coercive. Be friendly and just be kind about it.
Right. The next one is liking, which is similar to or the same as. I think a compliment is something that people like, and it's something that's positive. Identifying common goals that you're working towards is a liking principle.
Yep.
With it.
And, well, I think we do business with people that we like. There's an old Chinese proverb. It says, "A man without a smiling face must not open a shop." Wow. And I remember that all the time when I go to stores and people are grumpy. I'm thinking, you ought to get out of this business, because I'm not going to buy from you here because I don't like you. I don't think we want to get, I think a big thing right now that I find myself just avoiding is any political talk. I have very strong political beliefs, but it doesn't have to invade business. And every time I see businesses invading their business with political decisions, I think that I might not shop there anymore.
Right. It's a risky move.
Yeah, it's a risky move. And I think we just need to be apolitical on this, especially this time of year. I might put signs up in my yard, but I don't put them up in my business. And I think some businesses have said, you know what, I'm good with half of the marketplace on this. I'm only going to do half the marketplace. But I think let's get away from that. I think you have to be likable. I think you have to be friendly and kind and courteous, and the kind of person that we want to support, because if we don't like you, we just won't do business.
Right. And trust and rapport is important. And people do like to do business with people that they like, that are like them, but also they want to do business with people that they want to be like, similar to. And I think it's really important when somebody can come across as being confident. People are attracted to that because another person wants to feel confident. Now, confidence can be overbearing, and that's arrogance. And I think the definition of arrogance is a person that's saying, what I don't know doesn't matter. It's arrogant. Now, there's also ignorance.
Or only my opinion matters.
Right. And then ignorance is, I don't feel I need to know anything more. That's people that are ignorant.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that it's a fine line, because I believe that our listeners are going to know the difference between confidence, arrogance, and ignorance. And I think they're going to vote and commit to being confident. And that adds credibility too in the whole conversation. And when we're selling a service, we're selling a promise. The credibility defines the value that the prospect has in the bearer of a promise. That's a salesperson.
Right. It's really interesting, though. Sometimes our honesty, I have a guy that I get my cars done at who's a little bit grumpy, but he's so honest about how he does business that I really like him, even though he can be kind of, grumpy sometimes.
Right.
And his store doesn't look clean. It's just, if you've ever been into one of these shops, it's just like everything's covered with grease. And I'll overlook that because the honesty factor is so high and my trust level is so high for him. And I'll advise people. He's one of the few businesses that I am eager to advise people to go to, because he does a good job, and he's always, I feel I can trust everything that he does. So there are some things we can overcome because there's a factor about you as a business person that is so strong. Your ethics are so strong. The value, your concern for other people is so strong that we'll overlook other things in that likability factor as well.
Yeah. Our next one is on scarcity. And I think there are some companies that do this really, really well. I think Apple is one. I think Tesla is another when it comes to the scarcity principle. I think this is one of the main negotiation techniques or sales techniques when it comes to selling real estate. There is just one in most cases, and even if you're buying an tract development, there's just one. A condo, it's going to be a little harder to differentiate different models,
but right now
there's just one.
Yeah, but right now in the Minneapolis market, I don't know about our listeners from other areas, but in the Minneapolis market, they don't have enough stock to sell. So houses are going, when people put a bid on a house, they're putting a bid on it for $10,000 more than the asking price just to hopefully stay in the game. And so I think it really is the law of scarcity in that case. You don't even have to make it up. There's a real scarcity to what's going on in that market. And I think it does cause the price to go up. How can we do that in our business, though? How can we use scarcity in a business where we make 1 million widgets?
Well, I think some of our most salespeople are selling time. They're selling a service. So there's just a limited amount of clients that they can take on. If a business is scalable, beyond one person, there's also scalable when it comes to resources and people that are able to commit to it. And I think when you schedule something, you say, we're scheduling something that are 6 weeks out, that's scarcity. And people are like, wow, geez, I was hoping to get it done sooner. Well, if we could find a spot, would you commit to it today? Now you're getting somebody to say that it's urgent and they're committed to it. Then you might want to rearrange something accordingly and go from there. Now, be careful when you play that game, because if somebody ends up busting you at it, then you lose credibility. So be cautious about that technique.
Yeah, I think sometimes urgency can also take the place of scarcity. Can we make that more urgent? Can we increase the importance of that through urgency? And then I think also we need to, for example, in sales, one way to create a sense of scarcity is to limit the length of our meetings. Mm-hmm. If I'm in sales and I can meet with you for 3 hours, it's like, well, you're not very busy, right?
Well, you're not going to be very efficient either.
Right. Or when they're when they're talking about calendar, you don't say, well, anytime next week is good. I'm totally open. Right. So right. You control that calendar by saying, how about, Thursday morning or Tuesday afternoon, and it limits your calendar and gives you a feeling more of value, of scarcity.
Mm-hmm. All right. Bill and I are going to continue with the next 3 on the next episode of Get Into Our Podcast. So stay tuned for next week.
Yeah, these are really important principles, Scott. I don't want to give them short shrift and start going through them really fast, because I think they're important to salespeople to figure out how to use these in your sales process. They're very subtle. They're psychological in many ways, and too many salespeople think the only psychology in sales is my product is good, you should buy it. I do have an article that references this. I've talked about some of the things in it, using Cialdini's 6 principles of influence. We'll link that on the Get in the Door podcast page. So our final piece as we wrap up is our golden nugget. I've given you one of my favorites. I pulled it out. Men and women are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves.
Wow.
And that's by James Allen, and As a Man Thinketh. And if you haven't read that book, I would advise it. But they want to get better. They want their circumstances to get better, but they don't want to improve themselves.
Right. Yeah. Always interesting to take a few steps back and see how we got to where we are, because sometimes the answer lies in the process too, and we can correct it from there.
If I don't get better at selling, if I don't stay up with the times, if I don't learn how to use digital communications effectively, if I don't learn how to use the app that everyone's using now, I'm going to get caught behind. And I won't be able to improve my circumstances because I'm not keeping up either mentally or physically with the changes that are going on in the world. And, as I've gotten older, I'm very concerned about not coming across as an old fuddy-duddy who says, well, in my day, we didn't do that. So don't get caught behind. Improve yourself to improve your circumstances.
So check out the website, getintothedoorpodcast.com, for notes and links to other resources.
So next week, we are going to be doing Chapter 3 of the Beyond Selling Value book, The Power of Research, Digging for Clues. And I want to remind everyone that we are doing a book giveaway every week. So go to getinthedoorpodcast.com, send us a note, a comment, a question, or just your name to put yourself in the hat for the giveaways for the book Beyond Selling Value. And then the topic will be the last 3 Cialdini's six principles of influence. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.